Hey everyone, this is Pastor Jacob coming to you for week 9 of our Bible study, Better Together. This week I want to talk about the perfect church. As you read through the text, you'll see that this is ultimately what Paul is praying for, what he believes that we will eventually become. Do you believe the perfect church exists? Dr. Morocco always likes to make a joke about how if you find the perfect church, don't go there because you'll ruin it. And it's true. We are imperfect people, and imperfect people make up every single church. And so every church is going to have its challenges. Every church is going to have its problems. But this text that we read today is actually talking about how the Lord intends to perfect the church until he returns. It's a very interesting passage, but he begins with a piece of poetry. It actually comes out of the Psalms, and you can read it. It's in Psalm 68. The portion that he quotes is actually verse 18, and this is what it says. You ascended on high, you led captivity captive, or another translation says you led a crowd of captives. And then it says you have received gifts among men from the rebellious, that the Lord might dwell there. And see, what is happening here is David is describing essentially a victory that he had. He went, he fought battles, and he's coming back into the city of David on Mount Zion. He's ascending the mountain with a host of captives. And what he's doing now is he's distributing gifts, the spoils of war, the nations that they overcame. He's distributing the treasures to everyone who's there to celebrate. And what's amazing is Ephesians gives the same idea. He's quoting this passage essentially saying this is what Jesus did. He came. He waged war against sin and the devil. He overcame. He descended into hell. He led captives into freedom, liberty, salvation in heaven. And today is distributing gifts. It's the very same thing. Now, here's what's interesting. He begins then to go in verse 11, he describes what the gifts are that Jesus is distributing. Now, I'll just tell you, the gifts that Jesus is distributing in this passage that is going to perfect the church, it's not talking about gifts of healing or prophecy. It's not talking about gifts of hospitality or servanthood or leadership. All of those things are important, and those are all valuable gifts, some we've talked about in previous weeks. So what are the gifts that the Bible's talking about here? Well, he names 5: the apostle, the prophet, the evangelist, the pastor, and the teacher. This is what we call the fivefold ministry, but these are gifts that Jesus sends to the church. I've often used, and maybe you've heard this before, but if you're watching, I want you to do this with me. A simple way you can remember the fivefold ministry is take your hand. You have, first of all, your pointer finger. This is the prophet. He's pointing the way, maybe bringing correction at times. Then you have your middle finger. You'll notice it sticks out further than any of your other fingers. This is the first contact. This is the evangelist. It's the first hearing of the gospel, the first contact with Jesus. Next, on this hand, I have a wedding ring, and this represents the pastor, he who is married to the church. Fourth, you have the pinky. And if you were to hold a cup, it's like this professional, proper etiquette sort of thing. That's the teacher. How do we handle ourselves? How are we supposed to act and respond? And then we have the thumb, which is the apostle that holds everything together. So it's amazing to consider the gifts that Jesus is still pouring out: the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher. And you'll notice all of these things are happening within the church world. As kings, we believe in apostles and prophets. We attempt to have all different expressions of these gifts and offices in our church at different times, sometimes through guests, and some are resident right here in our church. But it's important to be plugged in and a part. And if we are a part of this body, And if we're receiving these gifts that Jesus has of these offices, it actually describes, and this is what I want you guys to discuss today. It's more than I can cover in just our short video here. But it actually says that these offices or these gifts will equip the church for works of ministry until, and this is what it says. And I want you to discuss each of these. What does this actually mean? First of all, till we come to a unity of the faith. What does that actually look like? It's not just talking about our church, it's talking about the church world as a whole. What would a unified church look like? Second, a knowledge of the Son of God. It's very important. We have a lot of different denominations and people divided over who Jesus is. I was just in Israel dealing with Jews who many are still debating who is the Son of God. Is Jesus the Messiah? Well, he said he's going to continue to pour out the gifts of the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher until there is a knowledge of the Son of God. Third, there is a perfect man. Until we are made perfect, we're going to continue to have these gifts. Number 4 is the measure, the stature of the fullness of Christ. I want you to dig in, pray, research. What does that actually mean? Until we are no longer children tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. That's a big thing. God's going to continue to send teachers and leaders in our life until we are not swayed by false doctrine, not tossed to and fro by the trickery of men. What does that look like? You guys can talk about it. And then the last part is the whole body doing its share. Kind of what we talked about last week. But when we are under right leadership, they equip us and they challenge us to do things for the Lord. The whole body doing its share. That means we've all got a part to play. And the Lord is going to continue to raise up apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers until we fulfill this vision and become the perfect church. Well, have fun digging into the study today. God bless you guys. We'll see you next week.